which is a very expansive subject. He spends a lot of time discussing this. And this, interestingly enough, we've reached, walillah alhamd, the second half of the book. There's 2.5 chapters left. So this half chapter on Riyat and Jah will be finished. After we finish that, inshallah, we'll have two more chapters, and then we'll have completed the third book, or the third section of Ihya Ulumuddin bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. And after that, we'll continue into the munjiyat, which are the saving graces, or the character traits that we should work on building. So we've been spending all this time on character traits that we should learn how to control and learn how to channel and to manage. Inshallah, the next book or the next section will be a discussion on character traits that we should learn to build and uphold. So we'll be talking today, inshallah, about Riya. So the next chapter, next discussion is a condemnation of Riya. And what Imam Ghazali does here is basically he talks about the ayat that talk about Riya, he talks about the ahadith, and he talks about the different athar, or the statements from the different narrations about Riya. Here he says that he's going to break it down into 10 sections. And he's going to talk about what different situations would you show good deeds, in what different situations would you hide good deeds, where does Riya play a role, where does it play an effect. And this is, like we said, it's a lengthy discussion, it's a long discussion that requires a lot of details that we go through and a lot of time that we spend on to make sure that we don't fall into it. But sometimes it can become confusing. And the confusion falls and the confusion comes in when we overcompensate sometimes for deeds. And that overcompensation can be in terms of waswasa, which is like the whisperings, or sometimes we get like OCD, like I don't want to do this, otherwise what are people going to say? And we will undermine our own good intention behind things. Sometimes there's a misunderstanding of what riya actually is and what it actually means, and inshallah he's going to get into that and he's going to discuss that bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. So he says here, know that showing off is forbidden, yani meaning riya is forbidden and the one who shows off is detested by Allah. This has been testified by verses, narrations, and the statements of the scholars and the companions. So the ayat and the verses that he starts with, he says, فَوَيْلٌ لِلْمُصَلِّينَ الَّذِينَ هُمْ عَنْ صَلَاتِهِمْ سَاهُونَ الَّذِينَ هُمْ يُرَاءُونَ. He says, so woe to those who pray but are heedless of their prayer, those who are all show. Yani they do mura'a, right? They show riya, or they're doing it out of show. The next verse, من كان يريد العزة فلله العزة جميعا إليه يصعد الكلم الطيب والعمل الصالح يرفعه والذين يمكرون السيئات لهم عذاب شديد ومكر أولئك هو يبور. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that if anyone desires power, all power belongs to Allah. The good words rise up to him and he lifts up righteous deeds, but a severe torment awaits those who plot evil and their plotting will come to nothing. So Mujahid is a tabi'i, he's a student of a companion. He says that they are the people of showing off. These are the people who fall into riya. The next verse he means, إنما نطعمكم لوجه الله لا نريد منكم جزاء ولا شكورا, that we feed you for the sake of Allah alone, we seek neither recompense nor thanks from you. Again, this is a meaning to clarify and to help us understand that the relationship that we have with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it is not a zero-sum relationship, meaning that there's no reason, I'm not praying so that Allah gives me rizq, right? I'm not fasting so He Azza wa Jal gives me a good job. I'm not making hajj so He Azza wa Jal gives me safety. That's not how that relationship works. I should make sure that whatever deed I am doing, and the reason I'm doing it is for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's sake alone. So he says here is commending the sincere ones negates any intention other than seeking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's countenance, meaning His pleasure, while showing off is the opposite, while doing riya is the opposite. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He also says, قُلْ إِنَّمَا أَنَا بَشَرٌ مِثْلُكُمْ يُوحَى إِلَيَّ أَنَّمَا إِلَهُكُمْ إِلَهٌ وَاحِدٌ فَمَنْ كَانَ يَرْجُو لِقَاءَ رَبِّهِ فَلْيَعْمَلْ عَمَلًا صَالِحًا وَلَا يُشْرِكْ بِعِبَادِ رَبِّهِ الْأَحَدَ. Say, I am only a human being like you, to whom it has been revealed that your Lord or your God is one. Anyone who fears to meet his Lord should do good deeds and give no one a share in the worship due to his Lord. So over here, Imam Ghazali, he actually uses this verse in an interesting way, because it's not, the verse is very clearly talking about greater shirk. It's talking about in open sharing partners with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but he's using it to talk about minor shirk. And these were all revealed regarding those who seek reward and praise for their acts of worship. So here, Imam Ghazali, he talks about, all right, well, why would anybody do riyah? Like, why would anybody show off? Why would anybody do a act or why would anybody do a deed or worship to get praise from others? And he's saying that's the main reason. This recognition, this need to be recognized, this want to be recognized, the seeking of status, which is why he includes it in this chapter, right? This chapter about riyah, about showing off, and the status about wealth, this chapter about wealth and status. So there are different ways and different types of commodities that we as individuals, as human beings, seek after, and from them is status and wealth. And it is through riyah that we actually achieve status. So there are a few narrations he mentions. So Abu Hurairah radiallahu anh, he mentioned the narration of the three categories. Now the three categories are the mujahid, the one who gives charity, and the qari, right, the one who recites the book of Allah. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says to all of them, you've lied. I wanted it to be said of you, so-and-so is generous, so-and-so is brave, and so-and-so is a reciter. And the Prophet ﷺ informed us that they would not be rewarded, and showing off would nullify their deeds. And this is an important point that Imam Ghazali stresses on later on during the discussion on what effect does riyah have on deeds, and then his differentiation between riyah and minor shirk, and why those are problematic and which one is actually worse. But over here, it's very clear, at the least, if someone does something, if he does a deed or he does an act of worship in showing off, what happens to that deed? I'm sorry? It's nullified, right? That deed is nullified. So if somebody prays, but they're doing it or they're extending their prayer because they want the people to call him someone who, has a long prayer, or someone who extends his ruku, or like he wants to be known to be a pious worshiper, that worship would then be negated. Ibn Umar radiallahu anh, he said that the Prophet ﷺ said, whoever shows off, whoever falls into riyah, Allah will expose him, and whoever hears about someone and shows off, Allah will expose him. So here the Prophet ﷺ is talking about not only the person who is falling into riyah, but he's also talking about someone else who tries to praise that person. And this is something that we should be careful of. Many times we will fall into the public discourse of talking about people, talking about how knowledgeable they are, or how wonderful a person is, without knowing the reality. And here the Prophet ﷺ is bringing that sense of accountability. So if we speak about someone, it's very important that we know who it is that we're speaking about, and that we're firmly committed and firmly understand who it is that we're discussing. The Prophet ﷺ also said, the thing I fear most for you is minor shirk. The companions, they asked, what is minor shirk, O Messenger of Allah? He said, showing off, riyah. Allah the Almighty will say on the Day of Judgment, when rewarding people for their deeds, go to those for whom you used to show off in the world and see if you find any reward with them. Meaning that you're not going to find any reward with me. What you did this deed for, and the reason you were doing this deed, go and seek it from them. Because you weren't doing it for me. You weren't doing it for my sake. And what's going to happen when the people hear this? How are they going to feel? It's just going to be terrifying for them. They're like, man, I went and did all this work and I did all this effort, and all of these people, they can do nothing for me. We're in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in a time and a place, and we know that He's the only one that can reward. And we have completely ruined our actions for a small share of this dunya. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us. The Prophet ﷺ also said, seek refuge with Allah from the pit of sorrow. And they asked, what is it, O Messenger of Allah? What is this pit of sorrow that you're talking about? He said, it is a valley in Jahannam, a valley in hell, prepared for the reciters who show off. In another hadith, the Prophet ﷺ said, Allah the Almighty will say, whoever does a deed while associating others with me, I will leave him and his shirk. I am the richest of all. I am not in need of any partner. Some statements here. There's a few that I'll share with you. Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anh, he said, he saw a man bowing his neck, meaning that he saw someone like walking with their head low. And he said, O owner of this neck, lift your head. Humility is not in the neck, rather humility is in the heart. Abu Imam al-Bahili, he saw a man weeping in his prostration and said, you, if this is what you do it in your own home. Meaning, don't do it in front of others. The next one, Ali, karamallahu wajhu, he said, the one who shows off has three signs. He becomes lazy when alone and active when with people. He increases in action when praised, and he decreases when criticized. So over here, Imam Ghazali, he's given us a general definition of what riya is, what it means, what it entails. And now, with these verses, and with these ahadith, and with these athar, with these narrations, we actually have more of an insight on what that means and what that entails, and how it is that we should make an effort to avoid these things. So, what are some things that stand out for you? Hmm. Which one? Oh, he becomes lazy when he's alone and active when with people. You're saying that this is in general. Sure. He's so. This is the first question. What does riya apply to? What type of actions? I'm sorry? Worship. Ahsant. Right? It applies to acts of worship. Meaning that if things like running, swimming, biking, drinking water, like having a nice car, does riya apply to those things? So Ghazali will talk about it. It does, but it doesn't have the same consequences. Because if a person runs fast for the sake of showing that he can be the fastest, was he seeking reward in that? No, he wasn't seeking reward. So how would the action be nullified? It can't be, right? It was never that was never one of the purpose that was there. So over here he's talking very much about religious deeds. So actually had a brother ask me about this. He said, "Okay, well, when you lead prayer and you pray alone, when you're praying alone, you usually pray faster. Like, is that can that not be riya?" And I said, "Yes, it can, but is your intention when you're leading others because now you are responsible for a group of people versus when you were praying alone where you're responsible for yourself, right? There's different perspectives that can be taken when we look at a lot of these deeds. And sometimes, again, this OCD that happens when we deal with our own intention, it can become very debilitating for some of us, where we just become so hyper focused on, well, what was my intention? Am I doing it for Allah Subhanahu wa Taala? Well, okay, well, this other person saw me. Did it change the way? Okay, would I have done it in this way? And it's more so in trying to figure out, okay, how do I deal with this issue, and how do I deal with my sincerity? And Imam Ghazali has a Kitab al-Ikhlas, right? So he has a book where he discusses what sincerity is and how he is. And here he's going to talk about how do you deal with riya. So sincerity is one aspect of it, and avoiding riya is the other one. And it's important to understand, okay, how do I develop that balance? And I think a lot of it has to do with being able to define some of these things and looking for signs, right? Looking for signs within ourselves without becoming obsessive over what it is that I thought. And waswasa is unhealthy, right? This idea of like these constant whispers that we hear on ourselves. Is it okay for me to question? Right, I should. It's not just okay. Like when we talk about mujahada, when we talk about doing our tazkiya, when we talk about tasawwuf, when we talk about purifying ourselves, all of it is questioning. Like, why am I doing this? And we should question ourselves. Is any one of us above being questioned? No. So the difference between questioning myself and asking myself and doubting myself, these are two different things, right? And if I find that my doubts are more than my questions, then what should I do? I'm sorry? Right, I should seek help at that point, right? If I feel my doubts are more than my questions, I need to seek help. And if my questions are more than my doubts, what should I do? I continue, right? I think that is still a healthy state. It doesn't mean that we don't need help, but the amount of help that I need would be significantly less. And there's granted, there's no one above from us who is above that. No one above like seeking help. But again, this is just meant to be a personal spiritual gauge to determine where we are, where we stand, and how to manage ourselves. Yes. Yes. I do. Now, doubting my intention, I think that's waswasa. But questioning it, I think, is something that is very healthy because is it here? Let me put it this way: I pray, and I'm reminding myself, okay, why am I praying? I'm praying because I want Allah Subhanahu wa Taala to be pleased with me, and I'm going to ask Him. This is a conversation that I'm going to engage with Him Azza wa Jal, and I'm going to seek from Him to remove all of the shortcomings that I have and to make things easy for me, right? Like, do I never have to ask myself again that now? Do you see? Yeah. Hmm. Sure. So if your heart is pulling you toward action, for example, it's like, man, you know what? I'm gonna go to the masjid. I'm gonna give sadaqah today, and you don't do it. You're like, oh, well, you need to save your money for other things, or what I mean. That happens. But that thought, that feeling, and that drive that you had, what happens? You get rewarded. Ahsant. So getting into this positive mind frame, and continuously wanting to do good deeds, one of two things can happen, because like I can want to do 10 things, or I mean, let's say 100, right? That's probably more realistic. I want to do 100 things. How many of those things do I end up doing? Maybe just like a handful, right? Maybe I'll do a handful of them. The problem comes in is if my desire list keeps getting longer and longer, and my execution list, what happens? It keeps it keeps getting shorter and shorter, right? This is where now I have to recalibrate. Hmm. Sure. Absolutely. Okay. So in that situation, if I'm reminding myself, what have I done? You've questioned, and not just that. That is a sign of success from Allah Subhanahu wa Taala, right? The moment that I challenge my nafs, right? Because that's exactly what I'm doing. It's like, okay, I'm praying, yeah, beautify your recitation because I should beautify my recitation, and Allah Subhanahu wa Taala is deserving and worthy of that. All right, what if people hear? Let them hear. And you know what I mean? And sometimes it'll be like, oh, well, people might think your voice is. I want Allah to think my voice is nice. I want Allah to be pleased. You know what I mean? And that internal struggle is always going to be there. But just the fact that I'm having that internal struggle and that internal conversation, that is a sign of being blessed by Allah Subhanahu wa Taala. Exactly. And these are all signs. Like a brother had asked me, he's like, okay, well, if I don't always, like, not all of us receive encouragement for our deeds, right? Like how many times, like, and it only happens like with children, but as adults, has anybody ever walked up to you and be like, good job, akhi, you're making your 5 daily prayers, well done. Or somebody walked up to us and be like, I'm glad you give your zakat. Maybe Hajj, right? You get a congratulations because it's like, a once in a lifetime for some people. But like taking your shahada, yeah. Like if you remember, right? Like, but and nobody says like, mashallah, you completed the month of Ramadan, way to go. Like it's very rare that we'll receive compliments for fulfilling our obligatory deeds, right? The things that we're supposed to do. So what should motivate me, right? If I do these deeds, I'm not going to see more money. I'm not going to have more friends. I'm not going to get a better job, right? Like these things aren't going to happen. So what should I seek that will motivate me? Yes, Allah. But how? Right. So is there something that I can seek to show or to feel that Allah is appreciating what I'm doing? Because He'll allow me to do more. Right. Allah Subhanahu wa Taala will use me as a tool. He will use me as a tool, meaning that I'm able to pray more. I'm able to interact more. I'm able to have better relationships. I'm able to engage more, right? And all of these things, and even ourselves, what happens? We end up feeling more motivated, right? When we're doing something right, when we're worshiping in the right way, we just feel more motivated to do that. Yes. So you can ask for them, but the problem is the moment we have a conditional relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and that condition isn't fulfilled, what happens? Exactly. And not just that, even the way that if I keep putting those conditions on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and He doesn't fulfill them, I am going to be resentful because I keep putting, I can't put conditions on Allah, right? I just can't, right? And it becomes very transactional. And any transactional relationship, what happens with them, right? You get burnt out. You get burnt. So, and even Allah Subhanahu wa Taala, He describes that, and He says, وَمِنَ النَّاسِ مَن يَعْبُدُ اللَّهَ عَلَى حَرْفٍ. They get burnt out. Yeah. So He Azza wa Jal, He says that there from the people there are those that worship Allah Subhanahu wa Taala on the edge. In asabahum khair, whenever good happens to them, what happens? Shakar. They're thankful. When asabahum shar, and whenever bad happens to them, what happens? They're ungrateful. Do you see? So Allah Subhanahu wa Taala, how does He describe these people? Right, these are the people on the edge. He said these people are on the fringe. And as Muslims, we should never be like that. The Prophet ﷺ, he described the mu'min. He described the believer. He says, "Amr mu'min kullu ajab." Right? He said, all of the affair of the believer is strange, because when good happens to him, what does he do? He's thankful. And when bad happens to him, what does he do? Sabat, he's patient. It's very different, right? It's a very different perspective. So, regardless of the worldly experience that we have, because at the end of the day, Allah Subhanahu wa Taala, His relationship with us, a lot of it is qabd wa bast, right? So there are times when Allah gives, and there are times when He takes away. And sometimes that can be financially, sometimes that can be socially, sometimes it could be status, it could be like anything. That He'll give sometimes and He'll take away other times. And how do we react to that? And how do we deal with that? And if I believe it's transactional, I will become resentful, I will become angry, and what are the chances that I'm going to continue a healthy relationship with Allah? It's very low. It's very low. So I think it's better we worship Allah because He's deserving of it. It's very simple. Hmm. We hope for good. Yeah. And that's fine too. There's a hadith of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam where he said that all of the du'a that we make to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, all of them are answered. All of them. Either when they're answered, whatever it is sought, it is given, number one, either immediately, or it is delayed, or it is used to remove the sins of an individual and raise their rank, or it is kept for them in the hereafter. And some of the people, they will come on the day of judgment and they'll say, I don't remember doing any of these deeds. Like, where did all this come from? He said, these are all from the dua that were not answered in this world. And they will respond, they're saying, we wish not a single dua, whenever du'as was answered. Because everybody, on that day, we all want our scales to be heavy. Like, we want them to be heavy. And we want to see as many deeds as possible. And when, at that moment, when they look back at their time in this world, what is it going to look like? It's going to look like a moment, right? It's going to look like at a very small period of time. Looking forward, it's like, okay, well, the everlasting gardens. There's, you know what I mean? There's no comparison at that point. And sometimes we forget, right? We do. We will get caught up in the moment. And what do we call that? What state is that? If I get caught up in the moment, huh? Ghafla, right? It's heedlessness. When I forget, and we get caught up. There's something that we're like, we just become so hyper focused on it, and it can become very distracting. So some of the things here that really stood out for me is, how I act. I would say fundamentally different. I don't want to say different, right? Because we all act a little bit different when we're not around people, when we're in privacy. But a person who is sincere, how would we expect his prayers to be at home by himself versus how he prays in public? Either the same or longer, right? We would expect that. What at home? Is there anything rushing him? No, there's nothing pushing him. There's nothing rushing him. And if he's taking his time, it's a sign again of sincerity. Maybe when it's time to do public donations and people ask for money, we don't see him give anything. But that same person, 100,000, 50,000, whatever the number might be, they're giving it quietly. Yes. So I would say if it's the same, that's a good sign. If it's better at home, that's a great sign. Make sense? Yeah. Yeah, yeah. So the question I have is this a way to be liked? Here, no, I won't. I understand what you're saying. Let me ask a better question. Is this a meaningful way of being liked? Yeah, like by making my prayers longer, by giving sadaqah in front of the people. Is is that a meaningful way of building a relationship? It's not, because it's based on a lie, right? It's not true. All these things I'm doing, I'm not doing it out of sincerity. But if this person, like speaking to him, engaging with him, asking about him, like spending time with him, that that's a meaningful way. Because the other way, what am I trying to do? I'm trying to trick him into liking me. I'm trying to trick him into having a status over his heart. But this other way, this is a very sincere way of building a relationship. And exactly. And here, well, let me rephrase that. In every relationship that we have, is there not something that we benefit from that relationship? Yeah. Is there anything wrong with that? Like we, uh, as human beings, we are very self-driven. Like every single one of us, we're very self-driven. Like who do I want paradise for? I want paradise for me, right? Like I want to, I want to get into Jannah. Is there anything wrong with that? No. So where does this self-interest? When does it become a problem? If I'm seeking a job, or I'm seeking money, or I'm seeking food, or I'm seeking any of these things, where does it become a problem? When I do it at the expense of others, right? When I start taking advantage of others. But if I'm not hurting anyone, if I'm not taking advantage of anyone, then is it wrong for me to pursue my self-interest? No, not at all. Right? If I enjoy biking and I go out, I'm not in anyone's way. I'm going at a time where like I'm not taking up the road. I'm taking all of the bike lanes to go different places, and I'm enjoying it. Anything wrong with that? No. Where does it become a problem? If I think I own the road, right? I get on my bike and I ride in the middle of the road. People are honking at me. I'm like, hey, I'm a biker. Like I own the road. Like this is where it becomes a problem. Like I've put my self-interest now in front of the needs of others. A man said to Ibadah ibn Samit, I want to fight with my sword in the path of Allah, seeking His face and honor among people. He replied, you have nothing. And he asked 3 times, and each time Ibadah said, you have nothing. Then in the third time, he said, Allah says, I am the wealthiest of the wealthy, free from any partners. So over here in this hadith, basically he sallallahu alayhi wasallam, what is he telling Ubadah? So you need to question yourself. Is that truly why you want to do this? Is that why you're going out? Are you really going out to defend yourself and to defend your family and to defend your country? Is this why you're going out? Is this what you're doing that for? Are you doing this because you really want to please and make Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala happy? Is this the reason for that? Because if you're not, then He's not in need of this deed. Don't waste your time. Because that's what these deeds are. If it is not done for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it is a waste of time. Uh, we'll take the last couple. Al-Hasan said, I've known people who, when wisdom is presented to them, refrain from expressing it, fearing fame. Another person might witness harm in the streets, but avoids removing it for fear of gaining a reputation. It is said that the show-off will be called on the day of judgment by 4 names, O show-off, O traitor, O loser, O sinner. Go and take your reward from those whom you acted, for you will have no reward with us. So over here, this is an extreme example. What do you guys think? Does he mean this literally? Or does he mean this in a way so that it invokes this sense of self-awareness. Okay. Yeah. So you feel it's more of an encouragement, not meant to be taken literally. They no. Everybody thinks it's literal. You see an old lady about to cross the street, like I'm not helping her. I don't want people to say I'm helpful. I'm not getting up from my seat, right? I'm not standing for anyone other than Allah. Right? No, obviously not. Right? All of this stuff is a metaphor. Even Al Hasan himself. You know what's ironic about this? Al Hasan al Basri. He's from of the most well known and greatest known tabi'in. Like some of the like from one of the best known. So it's not even he didn't escape fame. Did that stop him from doing good deeds? Did that stop him? Subhanallah. The amazing thing is, you do you know that he, as an individual, he spoke very prophetically to the point that many fabricated hadith that come, they're actually his sayings. They're not hadith. Uh, let me think of an example. Do you guys know the dua for newborn? Barakallahu lak fil mawhub wa shakarta al-wahib wa balagta shudda. Have you ever heard this dua? Guess who said it? Not the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It was Hassan. So him, and it's ironic he starts with talking about sharing wisdom, when some of the wisest sayings actually came from him, rahimahullah ta'ala. And the last one, Ibrahim ibn Adham, he said that if someone wishes to be famous, Allah will not accept from him. Why? Because now all of his deeds are tainted. Every single thing that he does is tainted, and it's scarred. And this is a huge problem. And we had talked about before that is there a certain amount of fame that we need? Yeah, it's necessary. Like just like there's a certain amount of wealth we all need, there's a certain amount of wealth that we need as well. Because we need those relationships. Like we need relationships in order for people to trust us, in order for people to engage with us. I'm sorry? You need to have a good reputation, right? If I don't have a good reputation, why are people going to do business with me? Why are people going to hire me? Why are people going to involve themselves with me? Why are people going to be friends with me? Right? Intention is something that's really important. I'm sorry. Reputation, reputation is something that's extremely important, and it's something that we, as individuals, as Muslims, we should always work to protect. And we see this so much so in the public sphere, in the public eye, that anytime someone speaks about Muslims or speaks ill of Muslims, Muslims have an immediate urge to what? To respond and say, no, we're not like that. And that's good, right? There's nothing wrong with that. But what is the best way to change my reputation? Be a good person. It's as simple as that. If I want people to view me as a good Muslim, then I should what? Just be a good Muslim. Because when I go to the store, I'm going to be honest. When somebody borrows something from me, I'm going to be trustworthy. Yeah. I'm sorry? It can be, but that depends on my intention. Because the thing is, when we're interacting with others and when we're dealing with others, that is when manners, etiquette, that is when it's going to be. That's when it's going to be appear. Can I be brave in a vacuum? Can I be generous in a vacuum? Right? Can I be honest in a vacuum? Like it's just me? You can't. We have to interact with others. We have to deal with others. Yeah. So to make Allah happy. It's that simple as that. Hmm. Yeah. Sure. So I mean you here by making Allah happy, automatically I'm going to what? Protect my reputation. Saying that, are there people who do good things, and are there Muslims who are good that end up having a bad reputation? That happens, but sometimes we don't have control over it. A lot of that. Remember we talked about fame. And we talked about wealth. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He gives fame to whoever He wills and He takes it away from whoever He wills. And He gives wealth to whoever He wills and He takes it away from whoever He wills. Are either of those a scale of how good or bad that person is? No, it's not reflective of those things at all. So, inshallah, maybe I hope that clarifies a little bit. The next chapter is I want to touch on a few of the main points, inshallah, and then we'll get into the details next week. So here he's talking about the mura'i, yani the one who falls into riya, the one who actually shows off. Who is that person, and what does that mean, and what is it that he's actually showing off? So he says that, I thought this was actually a very amazing insight. He said riya, it comes from ru'ya, from seeing. And he said sum'ah, which is reputation, it comes from sama', from hearing. So I thought that was very insightful. And he says that the essence of showing off is seeking status and showing things to others. And reputation, it's based off what others hear about us. So like I said, I thought it was a very nice connection there. And he says, what is riya? So he says riya is, it makes itself apparent in worship. So essentially, if I looked at this person, he would look like an abid. He would look like a worshiper. But what is the problem? He's doing it for others, right? He's doing it for people. And he's saying that, what is he doing? And he breaks this down into 5. He says either it's going to be in display in what he shows, or it's going to be in presentation on how he shows it, or it's going to be in speech in what he says, or it's going to be in action in the things that he does, or it's going to be in external factors in the relationships that he tries to build. So inshallah, from next week, we're going to go through these 5 in detail, bidnillahi ta'ala, so that we learn how to avoid them. But we'll stop here, and Allah knows best. Wallahu a'lam wa sallallahu ala khayri khalqin, nabiyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Any questions? Yes. Sure. Oh, this is an excellent question. So you have something, and this is discussed in the fiqh books, that's called al-ishtirak fi niyya. So basically, can I have multiple intentions? Right? Can I have multiple intentions? I can have multiple intentions. For example, in mundane actions, it's totally fine. If I'm drinking a glass of water because I want to strengthen myself and I want to hydrate myself so I can worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala better, and I want to cool off, do any of those intentions negate one another? Absolutely not. That would be accepted. And that's completely reasonable, that's completely fine. Where does this become a problem? Where does this become an issue? In issues that are ritual, like ritual aspects of worship. I'll give an example. I'm going to, and because sometimes we confuse them. When I stand for prayer, can I have another intention other than worshiping and pleasing Allah? Like, okay, those are good. Yeah, yeah. But even that is what I'm saying. Even those things are for because you want to draw near to Allah subhanahu wa taala. That's it. So when it comes to praying, fasting, like all of these things, those need to have a pure intention to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's it. That's fine. But because even those, so here, okay, I see what you're saying. If I have a self-interest that has to do with a promise or a punishment, that also comes from where? It also comes from Allah. Then there's nothing wrong with that. I want to pray because I want to go to paradise. But that is directly in line because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in His happiness, He says that if you make me happy, what do you get? You get paradise. So those things, they would fall under that same circle. And those things don't negate. In the Sufi circles, they have a discussion of like purifying the pure intention, right? So that you get to a point where what? You yeah, it's only love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that motivates you. And you can always have a gradation in intention. And I don't think that's necessarily a problematic thing. And I think striving for that is healthy. But at the end of the day, did the Prophet ﷺ seek Jannah or no? He did. Did he seek refuge from the hellfire? He did. Right? So it's not wrong. There's nothing wrong with that. Striving for that, like I said, is healthy. but I don't think realistically these other elements can be completely differentiated and extracted from that. Anything else? Yes. Hmm. Yeah, yeah. So why did he say that? Umar radiallahu anh, he was the Khalifa, right? He was the statesman. He was the head of the state. And usually, when you deal with a lot of people, what happens? Do you have an idea of where people stand and where they are? Right. So, from some people, if you feel they're doing it out of a sense of false piety, would you not call them out? Like if you had a friend, you had a close friend, somebody you've known for years, and you know when they're being like we get an idea, like we know when they're being sincere and when they're not because we don't know that to be their character. In the moment they act out of character, and if you called them out and be like, "Why are you acting like that? That's not how you normally act." It's the same thing. Be like, "Listen, why are you doing this? This is," and if you want to be pious, this is not the way to show piety. You're just this is not you're not doing it's not organic. You're just putting on a show. No, that's fine. It's he's not talking about people. He's talking about him. He was talking about him individually. But in terms of bowing, lowering your head, like that out of respect for other, there's nothing wrong with that. Like even bowing in and of itself, it's most of the madhabs they say it's makruh, it's disliked. Yeah, yeah, it's it's disliked. It's disliked. Yeah, yeah. So it's not haram. Like the only thing that is categorically prohibited would be sajda. Okay. Hmm. So you should. So you could get what? Well, but there's no guarantee of any of those things. And if that was the case, was there anybody more pious? Was there anybody who worshipped more? Was there anybody more sincere than the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Like what happened to his wealth, right? Like no, that's the again that's having a transactional relationship with Allah subhanahu wa taala, and that's wrong. It's completely wrong. Yes. Mm, yeah, yeah. They hope. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, it's like another. Nadar, most of the madhab they say nadar is makruh, but it's still you can do it. So, for example, Ya Allah, I'm going to pray 2 rak'ah, and I want to make these 2 rak'ah because I want you to give me an A on my exam. Ya Allah, I'm going to fast for the next week because I want you to get me married. Right? This is called nadar. It's disliked, right? It's disliked, and we shouldn't do it because again, we shouldn't put conditions on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But how can I make that in a how can I do that in a better way? Ya Allah, through my prayers and through my fasting and through my sadaqah, I'm hoping and I want to use those as a means to get this job. I want to use these as a means to help me get married. I want to use these as a means for whatever. Yes. No. Mm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, no. Trusting in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is always going to be better. Having yaqeen in Him is always going to be better. But to put this condition, it's not good. It's not good to do that. It's jaiz, it's permissible, it's disliked in most of the madahib, but we shouldn't have it like that. It's like I'm worshiping you without conditions. And with that worship, sometimes we do different types of worship. Just like we have the hadith of the three men who were stuck in the cave, right? They say, "Ya Allah, if I did this for your sake, then please remove this stone," right? And all of them made du'a and all of them asked, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala removed the stone little by little. Um, that doing tawassul is fine. There's nothing wrong with that, right? There's nothing wrong with taking good deeds and saying, "Ya Allah, because of this good deed, please remove this hardship." That's totally fine. What I'm saying that we should avoid, and I'm not saying it's haram, but what we should avoid is like, Ya Allah, if like I promise to fast a week if you get me married. Ya Allah, I promise to pray qiyam for the next month if you get me this job. Right? Having that transactional conditional relationship, that's the problem. Right? It's not haram, but we should avoid doing that. Sure. I mean, the thing is, but the thing is that's fine. All right, if I'm fasting and my dua is accepted, or if I'm traveling, my dua is accepted. Does it mean that I will receive it? Right? The dua can be the dua is accepted. We believe that, but does that mean that I will receive whatever I'm seeking? No, not necessarily. It could, possible. No, no, I'm saying it's accepted. Like how it's going to manifest is up to Allah Subhanahu wa Taala. Yes, yes, absolutely, absolutely. I'm sorry. Uh huh. Yeah, and then it didn't happen. No, and that's why. Like we should avoid that. We should avoid that. But khair. I'll see all of you next week, inshallah. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك واشهد ان لا اله الا انت استغفرك واتوب اليك.